You're obsolete, Peterson. Your whole generation is. Marcus Bradley said those words while looking me straight in the eye, his $3,000 suit pressed perfect, his MBA confidence radiating across conference room B like heat from an engine. He'd been our CEO for exactly 73 days, and in that moment, I knew my 18 years at Green Grid Energy Solutions were about to end. I'm Howard Peterson. Everyone calls me Hank, and I'm 49 years old. Until that Tuesday morning in March, I was the senior engineering director at the company I'd helped build from a 12-person startup into a $2 billion energy technology leader. The smart grid management system that keeps the lights on across half the Midwest? I wrote the core algorithm, the patents that made us the only company capable of handling Japan's complex energy infrastructure. My name's on them. But Marcus Bradley saw gray hair and 18 years of experience, and all he could think was dead weight. The morning everything went sideways started like any other. I was in conference room B at 8:30 a.m., setting up my presentation for the biggest client meeting of our company's history. Yamamoto Energy Corporation was flying in from Tokyo to finalize a $750 million deal for our smart grid technology. 2 years I'd been building this relationship, learning the subtle protocols of Japanese business culture, earning the trust that only comes from proving your expertise one technical specification at a time. Mr. Yamamoto arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, punctual as always. I'd been working with him since we first pitched the concept, and he understood that our technology wasn't just software. It was engineering precision that could prevent blackouts across entire cities. "Peterson-san," he said, offering a slight bow as he entered. "I am very pleased to review the final specifications today. Everything's ready, sir. The load balancing algorithm can handle peak demand fluctuations 40% higher than any existing system in the market." We settled into the technical review, and I could see Mr. Yamamoto's appreciation for the details. This wasn't just about selling software. This was about demonstrating that we understood the life and death responsibility of managing a power grid. One mistake, one shortcut in the code, and millions of people lose electricity. "The fault tolerance protocols," Mr. Yamamoto noted, studying the documentation. "These are very comprehensive." "Yes, sir. We've built in triple redundancy for every critical system. If any component fails, the algorithm automatically redistributes the load through alternate pathways." He nodded, making careful notes. This was how real engineering discussions happened. Methodical, thorough, focused on what actually mattered. Then Marcus Bradley burst through the door. No knock. No apology for being 20 minutes late. Just the sound of expensive Italian leather hitting the conference room floor like he owned not just the building, but everyone in it. Marcus was 39 years old, Harvard MBA, and the kind of guy who talked about disrupting industries at cocktail parties. The board had hired him 3 months earlier to modernize our approach and scale for rapid growth. In 73 days, he'd made it clear that anyone over 45 was legacy thinking that needed to be optimized out. "Gentlemen," Marcus announced, not bothering to acknowledge that he'd just interrupted a technical presentation. "Sorry I'm running behind. Had to take a call with some VCs about our Series D funding round." I watched Mr. Yamamoto's reaction carefully. In Japanese business culture, interrupting a formal presentation was like showing up drunk to a funeral. But he remained professionally neutral, though I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "Mr. Bradley," I said, keeping my voice level, "we were just reviewing the grid stability protocols for the Tokyo deployment." Right. Marcus waved his hand like he was swatting away a mosquito. "Look, Yamamoto, let me cut through the engineering noise here. Bottom line, you need our system. We're the only game in town that can deliver what you need. So let's skip the technical theater and talk about what really matters." Technical theater. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. 2 years of careful relationship building, of proving our engineering excellence, and he called it theater. "Sir," I said carefully, "the technical specifications are essential for proper implementation." "Hank," Marcus said, and the way he said my name made it sound like a minor irritation he was being forced to deal with. "You're here as technical support. I'll handle the business strategy and client relations." Technical support. I'd been promoted to senior engineering director 6 months ago. I had a team of 12 engineers reporting to me. My algorithm powered every product we sold, but in Marcus's mind, I was the help. Mr. Yamamoto looked between us, reading the dynamics with the precision of someone who'd spent 30 years in international business. Peterson-san has been most thorough in explaining your system's capabilities. Perhaps we should continue with the technical review. Actually, Marcus interrupted again, pulling out his tablet. I think what we need here is some bigger picture perspective, some vision. He launched into a presentation I'd never seen before. Buzzwords about market disruption and synergistic partnerships, charts about scaling potential and growth trajectories. Nothing about the actual engineering that made our systems work. I watched Mr. Yamamoto's expression grow more distant with each slide. In 2 years of meetings, we'd never talked about disrupting the energy space. We talked about reliability, about preventing grid failures, about systems that worked when people needed them most. So, Marcus said, wrapping up his improvised pitch with a grin, what do you say we move forward and get this partnership locked in? The silence stretched for 10 seconds that felt like 10 minutes. Mr. Yamamoto finally spoke. Peterson-san, he said quietly, what is your assessment of the implementation timeline for full grid integration? I opened my mouth to give him the honest answer. 18 months minimum for a project this complex, but Marcus cut me off before I could say a word. Timeline's aggressive but totally doable, Marcus said with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having built anything more complicated than a PowerPoint presentation. We'll have you up and running in 6 months, 8 max if we hit any unexpected bumps. 6 months. My blood went cold. The most optimistic timeline I'd calculated, assuming everything went perfectly and we had unlimited resources, was 15 months. 6 months was pure fantasy, the kind of promise that sounded great in a boardroom but would destroy our reputation when we inevitably failed to deliver. Actually, I said, my voice carefully controlled, given the complexity of integrating with Japan's existing infrastructure and the extensive testing required for grid-critical systems, we're looking at 18 to 24 months for full deployment. 18 months? Marcus laughed. Actually laughed, like I just told him the Earth was flat. Come on, Hank, you engineers always pad your timelines by 200%. 6 months is aggressive but realistic. Maybe 8 if we run into some legacy system incompatibilities. Legacy system incompatibilities. He was talking about Japan's national power grid like it was an old laptop that needed a software update. I felt something snap inside me. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more dangerous. Professional pride, maybe. Or just the sudden crystal-clear realization that this man was about to destroy everything I'd spent 2 years building. Marcus, I said quietly, the grid integration alone requires... Enough. His voice turned sharp, the way a parent shuts down a child who's asking too many questions. Mr. Yamamoto, I apologize for my technical consultant here. Sometimes the old guard gets a little too attached to their processes, you know? Too much focus on worst-case scenarios instead of solution-oriented thinking. Old guard, technical consultant, in front of our most important client. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I could see Mr. Yamamoto processing what he'd just witnessed. Not just the technical disagreement, but the complete lack of respect Marcus had just shown for the engineer who'd designed the system he was trying to sell. Mr. Yamamoto stood up slowly, gathering his papers with the deliberate precision of someone who'd made a decision. I believe I have heard enough for today. Fantastic. Marcus beamed, completely missing the subtle cues that anyone with international business experience would have caught immediately. So when can we schedule the contract signing? I've got a tight schedule this week, but I can probably squeeze it in Thursday afternoon. I will need time to consider what I have learned today, Mr. Yamamoto said with the kind of diplomatic politeness that actually meant this meeting is over and not in a good way. But I caught his eye as he bowed slightly toward me. There was disappointment there, not in our technology, but in what he'd witnessed, in Marcus's disrespect for the technical expertise that made the whole system possible. After Mr. Yamamoto left, Marcus turned to me with the expression of someone who'd just been mildly inconvenienced. Hank, we need to have a serious conversation. About what? About your attitude problem. About undermining my authority in front of our biggest potential client. About whether you're really the right fit for this company's future direction. I'd been at Green Grid for 18 years. I'd personally written 60% of the code that powered our core products. I'd built relationships with clients across 3 continents. My attitude problem? Marcus, I was trying to give accurate project timelines based on actual engineering requirements. You were trying to make me look bad, he said flatly. And honestly, it's symptomatic of a bigger issue I've been seeing with the senior engineering staff. Too much resistance to change, too much attachment to the old way of doing things. The old way of doing things, like writing code that actually worked, like testing systems before promising delivery dates, like understanding the difference between what sounded impressive in a pitch meeting and what was actually possible in the real world. I think, Marcus continued, it might be time for some organizational restructuring, fresh energy, new perspectives. I knew exactly where this was going, but I had to ask. What kind of restructuring? Clean slate, Hank. This company needs leaders who understand that we're in the innovation business, not the caution business. People who can think outside the box instead of hiding behind engineering orthodoxy. And where does that leave me? Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I'm going to have to let you go. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd seen them coming. 18 years, 3 patents with my name on them, a team that respected my leadership, a client who trusted my expertise. Gone. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Your last day is Friday. Jennifer will handle the paperwork. Marcus, you can't just... I can, and I am. This isn't personal, Hank, it's business. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for the good of the organization. I walked out of that conference room in a daze. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the fluorescent lights harsher. By the time I got back to my office, word was already spreading through the engineering department like wildfire. Jennifer Walsh from HR was waiting for me with a stack of termination paperwork and an expression that could have been carved from stone. I'm sorry, Hank, she said quietly as she closed my office door. This wasn't my recommendation. I know, Jen, you don't have to apologize. But as I started clearing out my desk, 18 years of accumulated work reduced to a cardboard box, something started bothering me. Something about the patents. Something about the way Alex Morrison and I had designed the authentication system for the core algorithm. The patents were filed under my name while I was a Green Grid employee, but the legal language was very specific. The intellectual property rights were tied to my employment status, yes, but they were also tied to something else, my personal digital signature embedded directly into the algorithm's authentication protocols. It had been Alex's idea, actually. What if someone tries to steal the code? He'd asked during the development phase. What if a competitor tries to reverse engineer the system? So we'd built in a security feature that seemed like good engineering practice at the time. The algorithm would only function with verified digital authentication from the original developer. My digital signature was hard-coded into every installation. I pulled out my phone and called Alex Morrison. He'd left Green Grid 2 years earlier to start his own cybersecurity consulting firm, but we'd stayed in touch. More importantly, he understood the technical architecture of our authentication system better than anyone else still at the company. Hank? Man, I heard rumors something was going down. What happened? Marcus fired me, called me obsolete. There was a pause. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You designed half the systems that keep this place running. Alex, I need to ask you something about the authentication protocols we built into the grid management system. The digital signature verification. What happens if my employee status changes? Another pause, longer this time. Oh wow, I hadn't thought about that scenario. Think about it now. If your signature can't be verified through the employee database, the system would lock out automatically. It's a security feature to prevent unauthorized use. And how long would it take to remove that authentication requirement? Months, maybe longer. You'd have to rewrite the entire security architecture. Plus, you'd need to rebuild all the client integrations from scratch. I smiled for the first time in hours. Alex, remember when Marcus called our engineering work technical theater? Yeah. What an arrogant piece of work. I think it's time for the final act. That evening, I sat in my home office staring at the termination paperwork. My wife Linda was at her book club, the house was quiet, and I had time to think. Really think about what Marcus had just done. Not just to me, but to the company, to our clients, to the entire engineering team that had built something remarkable. He'd called me obsolete, but the man who'd just fired the chief architect of the system had no idea how that system actually worked. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos, my former assistant. Hank, something weird is happening with the main system. IT is freaking out. Authentication errors across all client networks. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. Exactly 24 hours after my termination became official in the company database. My phone rang. Unknown number. Peterson! Marcus's voice was high, panicked, stripped of all that MBA confidence. What the hell did you do to our system? I didn't do anything into the system, Marcus. The system is working exactly as Alex Morrison and I designed it. The entire grid management platform is locked out. We can't access any of the client installations. Fix it. Fix it right now. I don't work there anymore, remember? You said I was obsolete. This is sabotage. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you into bankruptcy. It's not sabotage, Marcus. It's intellectual property protection. You might want to check the authentication protocols in the technical documentation. The real documentation, not the executive summary. There was silence on the other end, then the sound of papers being shuffled frantically. What authentication protocols? The ones that prevent unauthorized use of patented algorithms. The ones that verify the original developer's continued authorization to license the technology. You mean the system won't work without you? The system will work fine, Marcus. But only for someone who has legal authorization to use the intellectual property. Check the patent filings. Check Section 7 of the authentication architecture. It's all there in black and white. More silence. Then, what do you want? I want you to admit you made a mistake. Fine, I made a mistake. You're rehired. Double salary. Whatever you want. Just unlock the damn system. No, Marcus. I don't want my job back. Not working for someone who thinks 18 years of expertise is obsolete. Then what? I want you to explain to the board of directors how you just destroyed a $750 million deal and locked the company out of its own technology in the same week. The line went dead. At 7 a.m. the next morning, my phone was ringing nonstop. Jennifer Walsh, Richard Barnes, the board chairman, even Tony Rodriguez from security, asking if I was okay and whether I needed anything. But the most interesting call came from Mr. Yamamoto's assistant. Peterson-san, Mr. Yamamoto would like to speak with you privately. Are you available for lunch today? We met at a quiet Japanese restaurant downtown. Mr. Yamamoto was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table where we could talk without being overheard. Peterson-san, he said as I sat down, I have been thinking about yesterday's meeting. I apologize for what happened, sir. It wasn't professional. No, he said quietly. It was very educational. It showed me the true nature of your company's leadership. He paused while the server brought tea. I have also heard about certain technical difficulties your former employer is experiencing today. I nearly choked on my tea. Sir, Peterson-san, I did not become successful in international business by ignoring obvious patterns. Your termination yesterday, system failures today. These are not coincidences. He was right, of course. Mr. Yamamoto hadn't built a multi-billion-dollar energy company by being naive about corporate politics. What I find most interesting, he continued, is that the technical specifications you showed me yesterday were clearly the work of someone who understands our requirements, someone who respects the complexity of what we are trying to accomplish. Thank you, sir. Mr. Bradley's presentation, however, showed me someone who sees our project as a simple software installation, someone who promises 6 months for work that requires 18. He sipped his tea thoughtfully. Peterson-san, if you were to establish your own consulting firm, would you be interested in working directly with Yamamoto Energy Corporation? I set down my cup carefully. Sir, I would need to resolve the intellectual property situation first, of course. But assuming that could be resolved, we would prefer to work with the engineer who designed the system, not the salesman who wants to rush it. When I got home that afternoon, there were 7 missed calls from Richard Barnes and 3 voicemails from Marcus, each one more desperate than the last. I called Richard back first. Hank, thank God, we need to talk. Emergency board meeting tonight at 7. I'm not an employee anymore, Richard. That's what we need to discuss. This authentication lockout. How bad is it? Every client installation is down. The system won't accept commands from anyone except the authorized patent holder. And that's you. That's me. How long to fix it? That depends on whether you're asking me as an employee or as an independent contractor. There was a long pause. What are your terms? Full restoration of my engineering team, Marcus Bradley's immediate removal as CEO, and a formal apology to Mr. Yamamoto for yesterday's disaster. And if we refuse, then you can spend the next 8 months rebuilding a system that took me 2 years to perfect. Assuming you can find someone who understands the mathematical models behind load-balancing algorithms for smart grids, which, given Marcus's preference for young MBAs over experienced engineers, seems unlikely. Hank, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Richard. Marcus called me obsolete. He said my generation was dead weight. Now he wants me to save his career? That doesn't sound very reasonable to me. What about the company? What about your team? That hit home. I did care about the company, the real company, built by engineers who understood that keeping the lights on was serious business. And I cared about my team, the engineers Marcus was planning to replace with cheaper, younger talent. The company will be fine, Richard. Better than fine, actually. But only if it's run by people who understand the difference between innovation and disruption. The board is meeting at 7. Will you at least consider our offer? I'll consider it. But I won't be coming as a supplicant, Richard. If I walk into that boardroom, it's as an equal. That evening, I put on my best suit. Not as expensive as Marcus's, but it had served me well for 18 years, and drove back to Green Grid for what I suspected would be the last time as anything other than a visitor. The boardroom was packed. All 12 board members, plus Jennifer Walsh taking notes. Marcus was there too, sitting at the far end of the table like he was trying to become invisible. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 24 hours. Richard Barnes looked up as I walked in. "Hank, thank you for coming." I took the empty chair across from Marcus, who couldn't seem to look me in the eye. "Good. Let him squirm." "The situation is pretty straightforward," Richard continued. "Our entire client network is down. We're looking at potential lawsuits from 3 major energy companies, and Yamamoto Energy has officially withdrawn from negotiations." "How much is this costing us per hour?" asked Sarah Mitchell, the board's finance chair. "Roughly $50,000 in service credits, plus immeasurable damage to our reputation," Richard replied. "And it's been 18 hours. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice lacking all its usual bluster. "The technical team is working around the clock to find a solution." "What technical team?" I asked quietly. "You mean the junior developers you hired to replace the old guard? The ones who've never seen the authentication architecture? We have Kevin Walsh leading the effort." "Kevin's a good kid," I interrupted, "but he's been with the company for 8 months. The authentication system took Alex Morrison and me 2 years to design. You think Kevin's going to reverse engineer it in a weekend?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Hank," Richard said finally, "what will it take to resolve this?" I pulled out a folder I'd prepared that afternoon. "These are my terms. Non-negotiable." I slid copies around the table. "First, Marcus Bradley is removed as CEO, effective immediately. He's demonstrated that he doesn't understand our technology, our clients, or our corporate culture." Marcus shot up from his chair. "You can't—" "Sit down," Richard said sharply. "Continue, Hank." "Second, I'm establishing Peterson Engineering Solutions as an independent consulting firm. Green Grid will be my first client under a 5-year exclusive licensing agreement for all grid management technology." "You're holding the company hostage," Marcus sputtered. "No, Marcus. I'm offering the company a lifeline that you cut when you decided I was obsolete." Richard was scanning the contract terms. "These licensing fees are substantial. They're fair market value for technology that generates $200 million in annual revenue. Technology that currently doesn't work because the patent holder doesn't authorize its use." "And third?" asked board member Janet Morrison. "A formal apology to Yamamoto Energy Corporation. Not from me. I'll handle rebuilding that relationship. From the board, acknowledging that Marcus's conduct was unprofessional and not representative of Green Grid's values." The room erupted in discussion. Half the board was studying the contract, the other half was arguing about precedent and shareholder liability. Marcus looked like he was having a panic attack. "You can't just steal the entire company." "I'm not stealing anything, Marcus. I'm licensing intellectual property that I developed. Property that you clearly didn't think was valuable enough to keep the developer around." Jennifer Walsh, who'd been quietly taking notes, cleared her throat. "I have something the board should hear." She pulled out her phone and connected it to the conference room speakers. "This is from yesterday's all-hands meeting, about an hour after Hank was terminated." Marcus's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "The reality is we're carrying too much dead weight in the engineering department. These guys who've been here forever, they're stuck in the past. They can't think outside the box. Hank Peterson is a perfect example. 18 years of doing the same job the same way. That's not innovation. That's stagnation." Every board member turned to look at Marcus, whose face had gone pale. "There's more," Jennifer said, fast-forwarding. "Here's where he talks about the Yamamoto deal. Honestly, if these old-school engineers can't handle the pace of modern business, they need to step aside. Peterson spent 2 years on one deal. I could have closed it in 2 months if I didn't have to babysit the technical team." Sarah Mitchell was shaking her head in disgust. Marcus, you called the architect of our core technology dead weight? That was taken out of context. What context makes that acceptable? Richard demanded. The vote wasn't even close, 10-2, with Marcus voting for himself and one abstention. Marcus, Richard said formally, your termination is effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office, a converted garage behind my house that Linda had helped me set up. Peterson Engineering Solutions had exactly 1 employee but 3 clients. Green Grid, obviously, but also Yamamoto Energy Corporation, who'd hired me directly for their North American expansion. And ironically, one of Green Grid's biggest competitors, who'd been trying to poach me for 2 years. My phone rang. It was Alex Morrison. Hank, I heard through the grapevine that you're back online with Yamamoto. How'd that go? Better than expected. Turns out Mr. Yamamoto was more interested in working with the engineer than the corporation. And Marcus? I pulled up LinkedIn on my laptop. According to his profile, he's now Chief Innovation Officer at a startup that wants to disrupt the solar industry with blockchain solutions. Alex laughed. How long before they realize that buzzwords don't actually generate electricity? I give it 6 months. The beautiful thing about being an independent contractor is that nobody can call you obsolete. My clients don't hire me despite my experience. They hire me because of it. Because when you're managing a power grid that serves 2 million people, you want someone who's seen every possible failure mode and knows how to prevent them. Marcus Bradley saw 18 years of experience and thought dead weight. Mr. Yamamoto saw the same resume and thought invaluable expertise. That's the difference between someone who understands engineering and someone who just talks about disrupting industries. 6 months after my termination, Green Grid's stock price had recovered to pre-crisis levels. The Yamamoto deal was back on track, with me as the technical lead. And my former engineering team was working overtime to implement the upgrades I'd designed as an external consultant. Marcus's solar blockchain startup folded after 8 months. Apparently, their revolutionary approach to energy storage couldn't overcome basic physics. I still keep the termination letter he gave me framed on my office wall, right next to the patent certificates and a photo from the Yamamoto contract signing. Some days, when I'm working on a particularly complex grid optimization problem, I remember Marcus saying, "You're obsolete, Peterson. Your whole generation is." Then I look at the 3 job offers on my desk from companies that understand the difference between innovation and experience, and I smile. Turns out I'm not obsolete after all. I'm irreplaceable. And Marcus Bradley? He learned the hard way that in engineering there's no substitute for actually knowing what you're talking about. If you're reading this and you're over 45, working for someone who thinks your experience is a liability instead of an asset, remember this: they need you more than you need them. Make them prove it. In the end, they didn't fire an employee, they fired their entire competitive advantage. The biggest mistake arrogant leaders make is confusing the people who built the foundation with the obstacles to their vision.